Thank you very much, Gulhan. Our next speaker is Professor Liat Kozma. Liat is the head of the triplet, or the three-headed hydra that Avner and I are also part of. She's a historian of medicine, the body, Egypt, and broadly the Middle East. She's an empire builder in many dimensions, the architect of a grand DRC program on the regional history of medicine in the Middle East, one of the co-founders of the social history workshop that has been operating on various domains over the last 6 years. The author of 2 books, the last of which, Global Women, Colonial Ports, has seen light in 2016. And without further ado, I give you Liat.
Okay. As it wakes up, I want to thank Avner for this opportunity. Even though I cursed you in so many ways and to so many people in the last couple of weeks while preparing this talk, I think it's a worthy challenge. I think it's an interesting challenge, and I enjoyed it immensely. And I want to thank 3 people who helped me conceptualizing it. Benny Nurieli, who's here, Dan Kedem, who's teaching instead of me today, so I can stand here, but also helped me and brainstorm. And Gal Ventura, who helped me with the visuals, Dr. Gal Ventura, who's an art historian. So what I want to do here is to talk about our aversion to insects and what it does to our environment. So I'm going to historicize it, and then I'm going to speculate as requested by the organizers. So I'm going to start with the 18th century. And why is it? Why do I start there? Because well before antibiotics and well before the victory of the germ theory, mortality rates have dropped. And the reasons, or historians speculate, that one of the reasons mortality rates dropped in the around the mid-18th century was because of environmentalists, or 18th century environmentalists and miasma theories. That is, people speculate that disease transfer through bad odors and poison raising from garbage, and they dispose of garbage. And when they dispose of garbage in the streets, they distance the cemetery from the city, they outlaw public defecation, and so on and so forth. What they create is an environment that has less insects in them. And in a moment, I'll be talking about what we know today about the role of insects in disease transmission. But what I can tell you is that you don't have to have 0 insect population in order to reduce mortality rate or reduce the rate of epidemics. The rate of insects, disease-transmitting insects, has to go beyond a certain level in order for certain epidemics to be less fatal and less prevalent. So already in the 18th century, the insect population drops, epidemic rates drop, and people start living longer. And the population most affected by this is, of course, infants who die from intestine diseases that are transmitted by flies. And one thing I won't forgive you for is for having me read the sentence. Not everybody knows that a well-fed fly defecates every 4.5 minutes. So in an environment in which the human excrements are not disposed of and fly population is large, children's food, or everybody's food, is infected by feces matter and bacteria, and hence high child mortality. Child mortality drops when feces are disposed of and the environment is cleaner, and as Khaled Fahmy argues in his olfactory Tale of Two Cities, it also smells better. So that's my first stop. My second stop would be what I hinted at earlier, is the great discoveries of microbiology. So if the environmentalists of the 18th century had no idea that insects had any relationship to disease causation, they reduced insect population because they were trying to reduce the smell of the environment. In around 1900 or 1890s, in the early 1900s, great men make small discoveries. And I hope you can see this. Ronald Ross discovers the role of rats parasites in the transmission of the plague. Simon discovers the role of the Anopheles mosquito, or the other way around. And then Charles Nicole discovers the role of lice in the transmission of typhus. That is, and I can give you some more examples of insects, but what I'm trying to say is that the 70s and 80s, 1970s and 1870s and 80s were a period in which humanities discovered the role of germs in the disease causation. The 80s and the first decade of the 20th century were a time in which we discovered the role of insects. And it became much more urgent to eliminate them. Now, it is not coincidental, of course, that these discoveries were made in the colonies. Overseas, for example, Charles Nicole discovers the role of lice in the transmission of typhus in the Pasteur Institute in Tunis, and gets the Nobel Prize for this in 1930. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say about this second stop, that our relationship to insects is now becoming scientific. Lice and flies and all of these insects are not as disease transmitting in Europe as they had been in the 18th century or as they are in the colonies. But scientifically, in Europe, it becomes much more urgent to eliminate them. And my third station would be the human war and the war on insects, which coincided during the First World War and its aftermath. Because what happens in the battlefields of Europe is that when the clouds of poisonous gas fade, what people see is that the land is empty of insects, and agricultural products don't suffer from insects, and they decide to use some of the gases, some of the intoxicants, some of the techniques in order to fight these our little enemies. For example, typhus is combated through an experimentation with poisonous gas. So people are introduced into a chamber, they wear gas masks, and they are gassed in order to see whether this would eliminate their lice. It, of course, does eliminate their lice, but that won't help me, of course, when I'm combing my kids before they go to bed. So other more complicated poisons had to be devised in order to rid the body of disease, but we don't kill lice because of typhus anymore. What you see here are images from 1930s, early 1940s commercials and propaganda that conflate the war on insects with the war against, in this case, Japan. after the First World War, also airplanes that were used for warfare are used for to spray insecticides on fields. In short, what I'm trying to say is that war and poisonous gas, coupled with the discoveries of earlier in the century, are making our environment much more poisonous. Of course, to insects, but to other animals as well. So my fourth point is DDT, which is the World War II miracle drug, and then post-war poison. What you see here, of course, is from the U.S. fields sprayed with sprayed with DDT. What the Americans discovered, or the world discovers in Naples in 1942-43, is that the typhus epidemic is successfully eradicated with DDT, and when it brought back home to the U.S. and after 1945, people use it, among other things, to fight polio. Polio is the epidemic of the 1940s and 1950s. People don't know yet, or scientists don't know yet, what causes it, but they're theorizing about the role of flies in polio transmission. And so in the late 40s, early 50s, when we already know that that DDT is poisonous, that DDT kills the predators of the insects. So what happens is that you kill the mosquitoes, you kill their predators. A few months later, another cloud of mosquitoes or flies would arrive to the environment and would have no predators fighting it. So we already know that in the 1940s, when schools and homes and streets are sprayed with DDT, but the threat of polio is still at large, and people believe that that DDT is the best of, or less worse of, two evils. And my last station in this historical review is Rachel Carson, who writes in 1962 her Dead Spring, the book Silent Spring, which starts with almost like this old song about Petah Tikva, the birds that don't sing because the environment is poisonous, and inaugurating one of the important environmentalist movements of the 1960s, and it's still with us today. This quote actually is talking about us, about the future historians looking at the past and asking where did we go wrong. So what I want to do next is to take up the challenge our colleagues have given us for this workshop, with us to ask what could have gone differently, or what could have gone a different direction. Could have we tolerated insects in a different way than we are today? Is a couple of lice on my daughter's head such a big deal? Are ants in the kitchen such a big deal? Is it something that requires so many cleaning materials and poisons? I grew up in a house that had these little cups all over the house with poison to attract cockroaches. I don't know if any of you grew up with this kind of. Anyway, so do we need to poison our environment? Do we need to keep our houses clean. My husband calls me a lazy feminist. So I'm a lazy environmentalist, and I'm asking, how do we have to keep our houses that clean? So, why are you getting stuck? It's getting stuck. Sorry. Sorry. We'll get here. Okay, so could we have stopped the ball rolling? And what I'm trying to say is that if in the 18th century our environment was already cleaner, and we have managed to reduce mortality rates, could we have stopped there? My assumption is no. My assumption is no, because people kept dying. My assumption is no, because the story of the cleaner city is mainly a European history. It's not the history of Egypt. It's not the history of Palestine. It's not even the history of the Second World War and typhus. So maybe no. And then the second stop, which is the discovery of the role of insects in disease transmission. Could we have stopped there? We know today that there is a certain amount of a bacteria that we can tolerate. So I said we have to reduce the insect population in order to stop epidemics. We don't have to eradicate it altogether. We have to reduce the bacteria. We don't have to eradicate it completely. Flies are not that dangerous if they're not sitting on feces. So if the environment is clean, why do we still have to kill the flies? Regular mosquitoes are not the Anopheles mosquitoes, and yet we keep protecting ourselves against them and again poisoning our environment against them. So could we have stopped there? Now, when we're reading Rachel Carson, certainly we could have stopped somewhere at around the DDT and the legacy it left behind it. So it's a question I don't have an answer here, but I'm saying that our insect-free environment is something that we're working very hard to achieve, and it's not something that's crucial for the eradication of epidemics. Answer the kitchen, which is a constant fight of our summer. My summer, your kitchen is cleaner, but is it something we actually need? Is there a present in which we're not fighting them so much, and we coexist with ants in the kitchen to some extent? And what I don't have the figures. This is not something I checked for the. But I've been thinking about, my own household expenses and how much of it goes on detergents and poisons in order to keep the house completely ants-free. Is there another option in which we can have mice? Are mice that bad if we don't have the plague? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But can we coexist with mice and rats in our environment to some extent? And again, is lice something we can tolerate? I can't think of a present in which we can tolerate lice. I'm just saying it's something that our aversion to flies and mice lice was born in a time in which they were fatal, in which they were really dangerous to our health, and today we're still keeping our environment very clean in order to combat a battle that has been won at least a century ago. So, of course, I don't have an answer to this, but when I'm trying to imagine an alternative present, as our organizers asked us to do, what I'm trying to think of is less use of cleaning detergents, less use of domestic poisons, and an environment in which our sensibilities are different, in which we can visit a museum, and as much as we enjoy pictures of humans and domestic animals, we can also enjoy pictures of ants and mosquitoes and bees and so on and so forth, and don't find them repulsive. If we can, in which we can feel something walking on our arm and don't jump in horror. Maybe it's a fly or an ant. So that's what I was trying to do in this lecture, to ask what is the history of our relationship with insect environment, and what lessons can be learned from the history of medicine to the way we obsessively clean and poison our environment. So thank you very much.